Nakacinda case exposed. Why the repealed law still applies. Stop misleading Zambians. Good day, viewers, and welcome to InspirAfrica Official. Tonight, we unpack one of Zambia's most misunderstood legal battles, the Nakacinda case. Was he charged under a repealed law? If yes, how can that law still apply? Or have Zambians been deliberately misled about what's really going on? Shots of Nakacinda walking into court. Split screen of old versus new penal code texts. Cut to newspaper headlines. Law repealed. Illegal charges. Legal twist. Before you pick a side, let's separate political spin from legal fact. Because tonight, we're exposing the truth, the one nobody's taking time to explain. This story begins with Zambia's penal code, specifically Section 69, the one that once criminalized defamation of the president. Many believe that law was repealed, meaning it no longer exists. So when Nakacinda was charged under it, critics cried foul. He's being prosecuted under a dead law. But here's where it gets complicated and interesting. Legal experts argue that repeal doesn't erase crimes committed before the repeal. In other words, if the alleged offense happened while the law was still active, the law still applies. Timeline graphic. 2022 law repealed Nakacinda's alleged statement date. Legal documents flipping pages. Quote overlays from the Constitution and Penal Code. So, is this a legal loophole or a legitimate application of justice? That's what we're breaking down, fact by fact. The Nakacinda case has reignited Zambia's legal and political debate. Can someone be charged under a law that's already been repealed? We unpack expert opinions, constitutional provisions, and the politics behind Zambia's most controversial legal showdown. Watch till the end as we explain why the repealed law might still legally apply, and why many Zambians have been misled by half-truths. The revelation came to light in the most dramatic fashion possible. In a Lusaka courtroom on May 17, 2024, when Magistrate Irene Wishamanga delivered a sentence that would send shockwaves through Zambian politics. Let's go back to where this all began. In December 2021, Rafael Nakacinda, then and now the Secretary General of the opposition Patriotic Front Party, made a public statement that would change his life. The 43-year-old politician accused President Hakainde Hichilema of summoning judges to his private residence, allegedly to intimidate and coerce them into passing favorable judgments in politically sensitive cases. It was an explosive allegation, an attack on the integrity of both the presidency and the judiciary. And under Zambia's colonial-era penal code, specifically Section 69, it constituted criminal defamation of the president, a charge carrying up to 3 years in prison. But here's where the timeline becomes critical. On December 23, 2022, exactly 1 year and 3 days after Nakacinda's remarks, President Hichilema signed the Penal Code Amendment Bill No. 25 into law. Section 69 was repealed. Criminal defamation of the president was abolished. The president himself took to social media, writing that the law inhibits the growth of democracy and good governance, impedes human rights and basic freedoms. And yet, Nakacinda's prosecution continued. Fast forward to May 17, 2024. Magistrate Wishamanga found Nakacinda guilty and sentenced him to 18 months in prison with hard labor. In her ruling, she acknowledged that the law had been repealed, but stated she would proceed with sentencing as a deterrent to others who might disrespect the judiciary. Nakacinda appealed.
On October 21 ST, 2025, Just Days ago, Lusaka High Court Judge America Kenga Malata Ononuyu upheld the conviction.
The appeal was dismissed in its entirety. Within hours, Nakacinda surrendered himself to authorities, Bible in hand, declaring he was privileged to go into prison for. Speaking for the Zambian people. This is where we stand today. An opposition leader behind bars. A repealed law still claiming victims. And a nation asking, how did we get here? The words spoken in this case are as important as the verdict itself. Let's hear from the key figures in their own voices. Magistrate Irene Wishamanga, in her May 2024 ruling, was unequivocal. According to court reports, she stated, I am aware that the law of defamation was repealed, but I would sentence the now convict for disrespecting the judiciary so as to deter would-be offenders. Think about that for a moment. The judge acknowledges the law no longer exists, yet proceeds with conviction and sentencing anyway. High Court Judge and Malata Onanuju, in dismissing Nakacinda's appeal last week, described his remarks as showing a deliberate intent to harm. The court found that, and I'm quoting from news reports of the judgment, alleging the president coerced judges to subvert democracy was not political criticism but an assault on judicial independence. Now, let's hear from Nakacinda himself. As he surrendered to authorities on October 21st, he told gathered supporters and media, "I am privileged today to go into prison for speaking for the Zambian people." He added, "I will continue to speak even in detention." The legal debate has been fierce. Lawyer Tobias Chilembo Hamankoyo, writing in defense of the prosecution, stated, Nakacinda's alleged defamatory remarks were made in December 2021, when the law was still in full force. He went on to cite Section 15 of the Interpretation and General Provisions Act, arguing that any liability or offense committed before the repeal of a law remains prosecutable. Hamankoyo was blunt in his assessment, writing, "Ambassador Mwamba should stop misleading the nation. The defamation law was repealed after the offense was committed, meaning the conviction was proper and lawful. But the Chapter 1 Foundation, which promotes constitutionalism and the rule of law in Zambia, offered a different perspective when speaking to Human Rights Watch. They stated, although the provisions on defaming the president were repealed, the repeal did not apply retrogressively. Cases that had been initiated before the repeal, such as Nakacinda's, are still being prosecuted and convictions are being handed down." However, they expressed deep concern, saying, "For the Nakacinda case, our concern stems from the fact that the government proceeded to prosecute a citizen based on a law that they acknowledge undermines Zambia's democratic credentials." Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba, a prominent voice in the opposition, has been vocal in his criticism. In a recent statement, he declared, "The incarceration of Patriotic Front Party Entente Alliance Secretary General, Rafael Nakacinda, on a charge of criminal defamation of the president is outrageous. Nakacinda must immediately be released as his first conviction occurred 2 years after the law was repealed." Mwamba went further, claiming, Nakacinda's fears expressed, in which the case was based on, that the judiciary was under the direct control of President Hakainde Hichilema, and using the institution to punish his political opponents and critics, is now proven, foregone conclusion and now an established fact. Harry Kalaba, president of the Citizens' First Party, added his voice to the controversy, stating, "It is troubling that the Lusaka High Court has upheld a conviction anchored on a legal provision that no longer exists. This development undermines public confidence in the justice system and erodes the principle of equal application of the law." Kalaba pointed to what he saw as inconsistency. Zambians will recall that on June 2, 2023, the late New Labour Party President Fresher Sewali was granted an absolute discharge by then Lusaka magistrate Alice Walusaku after being charged under the same defamation of the president law. Human Rights Watch weighed in with international perspective. Idris Ali Nassa, senior Africa researcher at the organization, stated, "Sending a leading opposition figure to prison under a law that previous administrations have notoriously used to silence critics is a blot on President Hichilema's record. The administration should quash Rafael Nakacinda's conviction, release him, and stop prosecuting political opponents and others under this revoked law." These competing narratives, legal precedent versus democratic principle, technical correctness versus moral authority, form the heart of the Nakacinda controversy. So what does all of this mean? What are the broader implications of imprisoning someone under a repealed law? The legal argument hinges on a principle known as non-retroactivity. In simple terms, when a law is repealed, that repeal typically doesn't apply backwards in time. If you committed an offense while the law was in force, you can still be prosecuted even after the law is abolished. This is standard legal doctrine in many jurisdictions, including Zambia. Section 15 of Zambia's Interpretation and General Provisions Act explicitly states that the repeal of a law doesn't affect any liability or offense committed before the repeal. From a purely technical standpoint, Nakacinda's prosecution appears lawful. He made his statements in December 2021. The law was repealed in December 2022. The timeline seems clear. But here's where it gets complicated. President Hichilema himself called this law undemocratic. He said it undermines human rights and basic freedoms. If the law was so fundamentally problematic that it had to be abolished, What does it say about continuing to prosecute cases under it? Is technical legality the same as justice? The Chapter 1 Foundation raised this exact concern. The government is prosecuting someone under a law they themselves admit undermines democratic credentials. It's legally permissible, perhaps, but is it morally defensible? Then there's the question of selective application. Harry Kalaba pointed out that another politician, Fresher Sawali, was granted an absolute discharge in 2023 on similar charges. Different outcome, same law. This raises uncomfortable questions about consistency and fairness in the justice system. International observers have expressed alarm. Human Rights Watch described the conviction as having a broad chilling effect on the right to freedom of expression in Zambia. Civicus Monitor documented a pattern of what they call deteriorating civil and political rights in the country, noting that, despite President Hichilema abolishing criminal defamation of the president in 2022, opposition leaders continue to face arrest for exercising their right to freedom of expression. The political dimensions cannot be ignored. Nakacinda is a leading opposition figure. His imprisonment comes at a politically sensitive time, with elections approaching in 2026. His supporters see martyrdom. His opponents see justice. The truth, as always, likely lies in a more complex space between these extremes. There are reports of other cases as well. The Zambian Observer documented several. A 24-year-old named Lawrence Kasanda of Kitwe jailed for insulting President Hichilema, Ernest Kamba, 22, and his elder brother Elijah Kamba detained for 61 days without bond or bail for defamation in 2024. These cases suggest a broader pattern, though details and context vary. What we're witnessing is a collision between legal formalism and democratic ideals. The letter of the law says Nakacinda can be prosecuted. The spirit of democratic reform says a repealed, undemocratic law shouldn't be used to imprison critics. Both sides have points. Neither has all the answers. The judiciary finds itself in an impossible position. Damned if they apply the law as written, damned if they don't. Politicians on all sides weaponize the case for their purposes. And ordinary Zambians are left wondering, what happened to the democracy we were promised? Thank you for watching this deep dive into the Nakacinda case. As you've seen, this isn't a simple story of right and wrong. It's a complex legal, political, and moral puzzle that goes to the heart of what democracy means. I want to hear from you. Do you think Nakacinda's conviction was legally justified? Or does prosecuting someone under a repealed law, especially one the president called undemocratic, represent selective justice? Is there a middle ground? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a respectful, informed discussion about what justice means in a democracy. This is the kind of story we'll continue to bring you here at InspirAfrica. Complex, nuanced, and always seeking the truth behind the headlines. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories that matter, more investigations that shed light, and more conversations that challenge us to think deeply about the world we're building together. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. This is Nakash, signing off.
See you next video.